Plenty of Star Wars nerds know all about Backstroke of the West, the infamous Chinese bootleg translation of Revenge of the Sith, which spawned such memorable memes as "Do not war!" But way before Anakin got burned, Sam Jackson got shocked, and Grievous got asthma, the Chinese provided the world with an original film adaptation for the ages. This is episode 4 as you've never seen it, so buckle up. I assure you, you're in for a wild ride. When you think of bootleg merchandise, you can't help but think of China. The People's Republic has provided the world with ridiculous ripoffs for decades now. Whether you're talking about Robert Kopp, Astro Homer, the X-Game 360, or fan favorites Superbat, Special Man, and Power Man, China's got you covered. The country's famously lax attitude on copyright enforcement has made them the go-to destination for knockoffs of all shapes and sizes. Pirated entertainment is its own cottage industry overseas, and in the late 70s it was no different. As most of you know, Star Wars dropped in 1977, but it didn't find its way to Shanghai till a year later, and the box office blockbuster never actually arrived to mainland China. This is actually a common problem even today. Western imports struggle to make it past Chinese censorship and into theaters. A lot of what does get through is heavily edited. In 77, when Star Wars was released, China was finding its way out of the Cultural Revolution started by communist leader Mao Zedong, who had died the previous year. Mao was all about preventing foreign influences on Chinese society, so Star Wars, as one of the biggest American-made motion pictures, was most certainly at the top of the totally not okay list. But see, word gets around, and pretty soon the mainland folks wanted a piece of the Star Wars pie that Shanghai was nibbling from. A popular alternative was comics. Not officially licensed comics, mind you, but locally produced illustrated book forms of banned movies. The usual process was that a Chinese publishing company would get a hold of a point-by-point story breakdown of a particular film along with whatever limited promotional materials were available, and they'd put together an adaptation that could be sold to people who either couldn't afford or weren't allowed to go see the motion picture. It was not uncommon, however, for the illustrators that made these comics to not have actually even seen the film they were adapting. Such was the case with Star Wars, or at least that's the only explanation I can think of for many of the, let's just call them artistic liberties taken in the comic. What you're about to see will only make sense if you consider that the creators of this work had not actually seen the movie to begin with. Understood? Righteous. Let's jump into it. Now, every Star Wars anthology flick starts off the same way. Yeah, not in this baby. Chinese readers started their Star Wars journey in a certain vast galaxy, the entirety of which was ruled by the Galactic Republic in the past, but now this republic has been destroyed and is now ruled by a galactic empire. Just doesn't have the same ring to it. Well, look, there's bound to be a language barrier with things like these, and the golden rule of cinema has always been show, don't tell, right? So let's look past the text and focus on the visuals, and the first panel is pretty promising. They've got the look and feel of Darth Vader down pat. I mean, that's half the battle for a Star Wars adaptation. I mean, for some reason they're calling him the dark-robed Lord Vader, but other than that, we're on the right track. There's nothing else that's out of the ordinary. Is that a Star Destroyer? Why does it have teeth? Okay, well, that's weird, but still nothing too unforgivable. I guess if a person heard the term Star Destroyer for the first time, this sort of thing could pop into your head. Wait, what's that? They're called trans-universal carrier ships? That's interesting. Oh look, it's the Tantive 4. That's a pretty faithful reproduction, right? Sure, I mean, Princess Leia's got some kind of Asian royalty seductress thing going on. Why is she dressed like that? All the stormtroopers are designed like Boba Fett for some reason. Tatooine looks like Saturn. Is that Darth Vader riding a Triceratops? Okay, none of this makes sense. I'm gonna give the authors one thing. For a book that gets every little visual detail wrong, it does manage to stay remarkably faithful to the film's overall plot. R2 and 3PO crash land on Tatooine. They're picked up by a sandcrawler, sold to Owen Lars, who looks straight out of a fistful of dollars, and then given to Luke Skywalker, who in this iteration you'll notice is totally shredded. Luke's work on the farm includes handling the repairs on this Boeing 727 airliner, driving around a massive tank to dust crops, and walking the plains while lugging a sci-fi shotgun to ward off trespassers. So just like the film, Skywalker eventually sees the message from Leia, and sets out to track down Obi-Wan Kenobi and deliver it to him. And just like in the motion picture, he runs into a group of cyborg African tribal men who knock him out and and ransack his belongings, only to then be warded off by old Ben Kenobi, who brings Luke to his underground sci-fi bat cave, where they watch the hologram of Princess Leia, and Obi-Wan tells Luke that the Dark Lord Vader was originally a pupil of his before turning to evil, and then using his martial arts abilities to conquer the dinosaurs and hunt down all of the remaining Jedi. With me so far? Oh, by the way, in this adaptation, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace, justice, and rocket launcher-equipped motorcycles. Also, Chewbacca is a monkey. Sometimes. And this is the Millennium Falcon. Also, there's no gravity in space. I mean, it's like you're actually there in theaters watching the movie. Fast forward a bit, and Luke, Han, Chewie, Kenobi, and the droids are on the Death Star and rescuing Princess Leia. There's no into the garbage chute flyboy line, but the crew does get caught in the trash compactor before finding their way out, and the iconic cable swinging scene gets a page as well. Kenobi and Vader face off, and spoiler alert, Vader makes Kenobi more powerful than we can possibly imagine, and the good guys hightail it to Yavin to get set for the final battle. It's there that the rebels get their attack plan nailed down, and Luke decks himself out in some totally fly cosmonaut gear before boarding his X-Wing. Blue Squadron, by the way, because apparently red just wouldn't have been a popular color in communist China. I want to go on record as being someone who supports the awesome cockpit design of Luke's X-Wing, but the intergalactic aircraft carrier standing in for TIE fighters is just plain confusing. During Luke's trench run, the Millennium Falcon swoops in to take out Vader's crew and give the kid a clear shot. Luke hits the target and the Death Star explodes. The day is saved. The comic closes with Princess Leia falling lovingly into Luke's arms, and in the words of the closing page, Luke feels as if his entire heart and soul have come under the sway of the princess. I'm not making this up. I'm not pulling your leg. This comic sold on the streets of Beijing for about the equivalent of $1 in 2017 money. If you are a young whippersnapper from mainland China in 1980, this was your Star Wars. Think about that. An entire generation of kids from China walked around thinking this was a stormtrooper, this was a Wookiee, and that Darth Vader's master plan was to attack Kennedy Space Center. Yes, I know. There is a reasonable explanation for all of this stuff. Artists not familiar with the source material, poorly translated proper nouns, adjusting the story to appeal to late 70s, early 80s Chinese culture, and I guess a desire to sell J&B whiskey to the readership. But as is the case with so many things, we shouldn't let what happened behind the curtain prevent us from appreciating the magic taking place on stage. Embrace the weird. Let the weird flow through you. It's only then that you will fully appreciate what much of East Asia missed out on. What they still miss out on. It may well be that the reason Star Wars struggles to find success in China, even to this day, is due to the historical cinematic restrictions that caused poorly adapted material like this to exist in the first place. Many of you may be surprised to learn that the first Star Wars film to actually be released in mainland China was Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in 1999, and as many can attest, without the groundwork laid in place, that film really doesn't stand well on its own. Since the original films hadn't received a proper release previously, the nostalgia factor that drives so many Americans to the franchise just wasn't there. Which, I suppose, begs the question, how much of Star Wars' success is due to its past? If you grew up in a country that wasn't exposed to the Skywalker saga, do the new Star Wars releases really mean as much to you? China's relationship to Star Wars has always been weird, and Disney's still struggling to get on the right track with them. I think the solution is quite obvious. This does nothing for China because this wasn't China's Star Wars. This was. So give the people what they want. That's right, forget about episodes 7, 8, and 9. Give them this, a straight-up theatrically released adaptation. To clarify, I'm not calling for Disney to recreate the original film for Chinese audiences. I'm calling on Disney to produce a film adaptation of the original bootleg adaptation of the original film. Because this story, this needs to be seen in all its glory. Release this Star Wars in China, and I promise you, people will pack the theater. And you know what? You can get started right away. Ewan McGregor's prepping for the Kenobi spin-off, so just make sure at some point during that flick he hitches a ride on this baby, and by this time next election cycle, you can rest assured the overseas box office revenue's just gonna roll on in. Want more really weird Star Wars? Then check these out while you're waiting for episode 5. And if you want to show some love, share this video and subscribe for more. Or don't. I don't really care.